The San Francisco 49ers 2021 schedule breakdown. I'm your host, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗡𝗦, joined by Cummings. Let's get into it, man. Let's just hop right in. All right. So we're going to get into the toughest game of the season. I would like to point out all of the toughest games that you will see are from Vegas odds. So the Green Bay Packers are the most difficult game for the San Francisco 49ers. That is, of course, assuming that Aaron Rodgers is still with the Green Bay Packers when week 3 rolls around. First of all, do you agree with that being the most difficult game, Ian?
Honestly, I was going through these individually before we saw the toughest game for the Vegas odds, and I had the Rams week 18, the final game at Los Angeles, as my personal toughest game. And especially if Aaron Rodgers doesn't end up playing for the Packers, we have no idea what Jordan Love is going to bring to the table at this point. So I think there's a few candidates for that. But if Rodgers does come, he's going to be tough to stop. He's the reigning MVP. It's simple as that. But it's not as simple as that when you think about, like, oh, he's skipping mandatory workouts. We don't know if he's going to be the QB. So that is a big variable. And if he's not there, it opens it up for a few other games to, I think, take that crown.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about the most difficult game, I think if you have a healthy Aaron Rodgers and he is still on that football team, I do think the Green Bay Packers game is the most difficult because I think that the Packers are the best overall team after some of the losses that the Rams went through. But I do believe that week 18 game against the LA Rams is that, kind of defining or must-watch game of the season, because I think that game could have a ton of playoff implications towards the end of the year if, the Rams or San Francisco, because listen, if Jimmy Garoppolo has been healthy, and listen, by that point, it might not even be Jimmy Garoppolo. It might be Trey Lance at that point. They've won a ton of football games when they've had their starting quarterback healthy. And that was obviously back in 2019 when they went to the Super Bowl. They could very well do that again in 2021 with a healthy quarterback because they have a pretty decent roster still. It'll be interesting to see how that defense looks. But what do you think is the must-watch game of the season?
Yeah, the 49ers are weird this year because, like, they're having a changing of the guard at quarterback, if you will, with Trey Lance. Eventually, he's going to be the guy. And with Garoppolo's injury proneness and Lance's relative, he has an affiliation with Shanahan's concepts. So I think that he may be able to be brought in to the starting lineup sooner rather than later. That said, this team, man, it's kind of on the cusp. It's kind of in the middle of the pack. We don't really know how it's going to factor in. And they did have a few injuries. I think 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪 Moore, Justin Skule, Jeff Wilson, all lost to season-ending injuries. So already that depth is getting chipped away at. But I think when you look at the most defining game, you have to look at those later season divisional games. I think the Rams at the very end is definitely one to watch. But the one that I marked as my most defining game was at Seattle in week 13. Why? I think that ultimately after the Seattle game, you have at Cincinnati versus Atlanta and then versus Houston. 3 very winnable games for a 49ers team that's kind of in the middle of the pack. But whether those games mean anything, I think it's going to be up to how they do in that Seattle game. Because at that point, I think they'll be on the playoff fringe at best. If they can't take care of business against Seattle, then it might put their hopes in jeopardy of getting that wild card spot. But if they can win that game, they can ride that momentum and potentially sneak in.
Yeah, for me, that week 18 game is the must-watch game. And that could very well be the most defining game. It could also be the week 13 game. My most defining game of the season, I think, is actually that first Seahawks game at home. You really would like to see this team, if they are going to be contenders throughout the course of the season, that's the game where I really want to see it, whether it be Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. I assume in week 4, it will probably still be Jimmy G as long as he remains healthy, which, let's be real, has been a real question for this football team over the past couple of seasons. I know that you kind of talked about your defining game being week 13. Would that kind of be your must-watch game as well, or what is your must-watch game of the season?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a defining game, naturally, you're going to want to watch it, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot riding on those games, so there's going to be a little bit of a correlation. But let's say the 49ers, let's say injuries continue to hamper them. Let's say they don't end up competing. I think that if Jimmy Garoppolo ends up getting taken out earlier rather than later, I think one game that I would really love to watch is Chicago, week 8, because Justin Fields, he was the guy we were very high on in our mock drafts. Every time a team that needed a quarterback had him available, we're like, yeah, we're going with Justin Fields. And now he's in Chicago, where he has a good chance to be the franchise guy. And you look at him and Trey Lance, those are going to be two guys who a lot of people are going to juxtapose them for years on end. and even against Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence. This is a quarterback class that will be a very fascinating case study way down the line. But right now, week 8, if Trey Lance is the starter, if Justin Fields is the starter, could be a really good showcase and a really good early glimpse into where these guys are headed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make. And it's 2 weeks after the bye. There's a chance that we see Trey Lance when we come back, or when San Francisco comes back from that bye week, because they're in a tough situation. They drafted a quarterback very high. They have a quarterback already on the roster that they have won with.
Yeah.
I think that you create a lot more pressure on Trey Lance if you go and you do win football games, early in the season, and you don't give you have to give it to Trey Lance at some point, because if they go on to win 12 football games with Jimmy Garoppolo, well, then you have a quarterback controversy on your hands. What are you going to do? It'll be interesting to see how the San Francisco 49ers handle that quarterback duo there. And it'll be interesting to see how their season goes, because they have been one of the most hit or miss teams over the past few seasons.
Yeah.
With this schedule, guys, let us know in the comments, how do you think the San Francisco 49ers will do in the 2021 NFL season?